What's good? What's good? Peace and blessings to the dope family. Before we get started, be sure to subscribe, hit that like button and bell icon to stay up on the latest. For those who don't know, this channel exists solely for the enlightenment, survival, and maturation of men. So the topic we're going to get into today is the practice of solitude. So open your minds, let's talk about it. You know, for those who know me, know I'm a bit of what they call an introvert. I have a healthy balance of both spectrums, actually. So being social or turning up is no problem for me, but I lean more towards being in a state of peace. So, you know, this whole, well, I won't say the buzzword because the algorithm of YouTube has been blocking videos and pretty much taking them down. But, you know, practicing this social distancing, solitude, quarantine, or whatever you want to call it. You know, for those who've been quarantining before quarantining was popular, you know, we thriving right now. So essentially we're being told to remain in solitude until further notice. And I understand the uncertainty of what's taking place in the world and the level of stress that comes with that uncertainty. But those of us who prefer this mode of existence sees the silver lining and recognizes this as an opportunity to calibrate, to grow, unplug, refresh, and just emerge from the chaos a new creature, a new man. As a caterpillar immerses into a cocoon and emerges a butterfly. So, you know, in order for men to remain healthy, strong, viable providers for their family and to be potent forces in society, you know, we need to take time out for ourselves. The world as we know it now is a society based on the haves and have-nots. And the competition has left many of us feeling like most of our lives are lived against the world, but little or no time is spent actually living in it or actually experiencing life's true essence. The only way I have found to constructively deal with this is by taking time out through a productive form of solitude. It is one of the most practical ways to reconnect with oneself, to regain clarity, and to mind of one's deepest passions and purpose. And taking time out for oneself, on the face of it, you know, it seems selfish, especially if you have a family. Yet there is a critical necessity for solitude as an essential component of personal growth and maturation. With so much of our time as men spent, you know, putting on an ambitious mask simply to fit in, to be seen doing well, to be viewed as strong, to look together, it's quite easy to become, you know, self-centered and less self-compassionate. You know, spending time alone allows us as men to see clearly that which either we can't see or society won't let us see, because we are so busy trying to outdo each other. Now, the goal for all men should be to know thyself. Now, to be clear, you know, the angle at which I speak of or the approach I'm taking is the abuse and overindulgence of a social life to the point to where your life has no meaning if you're not in attendance at every social event you can be at. You know, there are definitely harmful effects in both extremes, or if they're both overindulged in, you know, those extremes being solitude, which can be the seed or catalyst to loneliness and depression, and the other being, you know, a socialite, which is someone who can't be to themselves for extended periods of time and prefer to be around people and at social events in general. But let's get into the knowledge, get into the game. You know, first we got to establish what solitude is and what it should be and how it should be viewed. Some qualities commonly associated with solitude are not reserved to, but greatly associated with physical isolation, stillness, silence, and social disengagement. Now, solitude by definition is the state of being or living alone in seclusion. Solitude then doesn't mean being alone or being lonely. It is the purposeful act of choosing to seek one's own company. There are spiritual disciplines that require solitude and silence, and they are vitally important to the health of the soul and society. These practices of solitude are also arguably the most intriguing and compelling of the spiritual disciplines, and yet also seem to be the hardest to come by in our crowded, noisy modern world. But for the man who looks to build himself or build an empire, he must then first go into seclusion or some form of solitude to tear down and rebuild those parts of himself that's in the way, or holding him down or holding him back, and come out of his solitude anew. You feed your soul not in being busy with living out there, there being the world and expectations of being in it, but rather by spending time living in here being in yourself, in your solitude. But let's get into some different types of solitude. Now, I'm not gonna cover too many. I'm gonna cover a few of them, a few that I think are vital. But self-research is the best kind of research. I'm a pretty solid dude, but I don't know everything. Trust me. But solitude is a great practice and should be done by all. But it's not a one-size-fits-all type of thing. So I'll cover a few, like I said, for many different types of personalities, and maybe you can find one that fits your needs, or even create your own that's tailor-made to your life and your situation. Now, in reality, majority of us may not have the luxury of spending 4 hours each day in solitude, but we could likely spare 15, 20, 30 minutes a weekend, a month, a day, or every 2 weeks or so, just some form of decompression. Now, in the ideal world, this solitude would take place in the wilderness or some form of nature where you're disconnected from everything, including electronics. In essence, you are truly alone, and you pretty much cannot be interrupted. Your train of thought, your train of solitude, So first, let's cover what I call functional solitude. Now, this form is the most common and less complicated to apply. It's the most practical form in which your main focus is to just be alone a day or two, or even a few hours, to do whatever you want to do, whether it's play a game, read, work out, clean up, watch TV, whatever it is. No matter the cause or the activities you choose to do, the main focus is simply being alone with no human interaction. Interacting with other people is far more complex and fragile, yet intimate than we give it credit. Social interaction is like a dance or a game of chess. And we correlate and adjust our behavior according to how others act. We don't think about it much, because it's subconscious, because such behaviors has become fairly automatic. But every second we're watching for and responding to others' cues and deciding how to act based on social norms. We must compel ourselves to listen, to show interest, to check inappropriate comments. We must be proactive but also defensive. At the same time, someone may insult, embarrass, confuse, or manipulate us, and we must keep our guard up against these potential antics. And we must do all this while making our efforts seem effortless, even when you're around those who allow you to be yourself, quote unquote. Social interaction demands great vigilance and requires a high level of energy and control. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, but engagement with others provides an important balance to actively seek solitude. But ceaseless immersion in society is exhausting, and it drains the health of the soul. We need to break away from the crowd now and again and find rest from orienting our thoughts and behaviors in reference to other people. We need to be able to let down our defenses and reestablish a self apart from its response to others, to experience a state in which our thoughts and behaviors are purely active rather than reactive. So Functional solitude is simply breaking away from people with no actual goal, but to relax and chill the way you see fit. So moving along, the next form of solitude is active solitude. This form of solitude is goal driven. Maybe you've been putting off this project, this business startup, or just something important to your well-being and existence, and you want to get it done. This form is best for all entrepreneurial goals you're wanting to accomplish. It's not as critical to have no contact or turn your phone off, although it would help tremendously. But the goal here is to simply set out to accomplish goals by removing yourself from everyday social activities. Again, the goal is to unplug so you can accomplish your goals. Now, one of the most complex yet beneficial forms of solitude, and it's definitely my favorite, is silence while in solitude. One of the greatest perks of being in silence while in solitude is the ability to hear the voice that governs you, the Most High, in your own voice, of course. This world is a noisy, wordy place, constantly feeding us information. There are words coming from your loved one, words popping up on your phone, words blaring from your car, words spouting from the television newscaster, and scrolling at the bottom of the screen below. So you're hearing words while reading words. Every nook and cranny of your life is filled with messages about what you should do, think, and be. In the thick of this constant influx of information, it can be difficult to hear the voice of the Most High and to definitely hear your own. In the midst of so much static, it can be hard to tune into these faintest of frequencies. Now, in the hush of silent solitude, you find the space needed for undistracted and thus fruitful reflection. You can finally focus on picking up on sacred signals and listening to their urgent broadcasts. The more time you spend alone with the Most High, the better you can hear that still small voice and discern his will. The more you can quiet the noise pollution of the crowd, the better able you will be to attend your inner nudgings and become self-reliant. We can no more hear the voices and the clatter and crash of our busy lives than a whisper can be heard across, say, a loud nightclub or something. Intuition, insight, personal revelation are like fragile bubbles that rise from the depths of your soul. Noise is merely sharp spikes that pops them before they ever come into fruition. There may be all kinds of life-changing promptings firing in your soul right now, and you'll never even know they exist. If you don't walk away from the crowd and find a quiet space apart from them. The need for silence and solitude obviously seems incredibly relevant to the over-convenient citizens of the modern world who feel saturated with ceaseless noise that issues from every corner of their lives. But as mentioned at the start, men have in fact craved these states for thousands of years, long before anything digital or electronic or modern ever existed. But I think that's a good start. I gave you what three forms of solitude to practice, but let's visit the negative side to seeking solitude. Like everything under the sun, too much of anything can be harmful if not done properly, and if not done with the proper intent. All too often tone and intent can be the determining factors behind good or bad, success or failure, happiness or depression, etc., etc. So an example would be, let's say, a knife used to take someone's life has more than likely prepared thousands of meals prior to that act and was bought with the intent to be used as a preparation tool to prepare meals. So the intent of the purchase and the use was pure and from a good stance until the intent of the use of the same knife shifted to malicious intent. You feel me? I know that's an extreme example, but that's just off the top of my head. So, just to show you how the intent can shift something, but let's keep it moving. Now, generally, people avoid being alone due to fear and the risk of judgment. Many of us would rather be in bad company with someone we really don't care for, tired and depleted, than to appear miserable and lonely. It's no surprise that we avoid being alone and associate being alone with loss, rejection, loneliness, and a whole host of negative experiences when we live in a culture that promotes and rewards, couples and families more than it does he who stands alone in solitude. Now, confusing loneliness and being alone is a big part of the misunderstanding when it comes to this topic. Loneliness is an organic experience that we all feel at times in our lives. It usually surfaces after a loss or when our support systems are lacking, such as a relationship or, just somebody in our life. But we should expect to experience it on and off throughout our lifespan. It's possible to feel lonely when in solitude, but it's also possible to feel lonely in a group or a marriage, a house full of people. We can also have moments of feeling alone in the world when it feels like no one understands, what we're going through. Being alone can be a choice as well as it can be circumstantial. We can end up alone, but we can also choose to spend time in solitude for our own well-being. So spending time alone can, it can sometimes be a negative practice, particularly for people who are depressed and feel the tendency to isolate. Human beings are wired for relationships and unity, to be around someone, to be around people. So we all need to have some form of connection in our lives to other people. This is why some people in decaying relationships tend to wait until they have someone else to go to and then break things off, just because they rather be with someone they despise than to be faced with the temporary solitude simply because they relate being alone with loneliness. But if being alone becomes more of a defense and an avoidant behavior than a way to improve well-being, then it's probably not the best practice. We talked about that intent. Your intent has to be pure. The driving force behind the time alone is a good indicator as to whether it's a healthy choice or a self-sabotaging behavior. So in conclusion, overall spending time alone or in solitude is a good idea. It's in fact a great idea, probably the best idea that you can have in life. Being in solitude feeds the soul and heals the heart, and it provides the opportunity to become quiet enough to listen to your own thoughts, that guiding force in the Most High. It's an essential part of our well-being to take time out and away from the daily barrage of human and technological input that overwhelms our minds to maintain the greatest sense of well-being and harness and tame our greatest selves. And keep in mind and remember, in an individualistic or pro-narcissistic culture, we need to be mindful of our intent behind the seeking of solitude. Be aware of intention. Being aware of intention is an important part of the process and will ultimately have impact on the level of benefit that comes with the time spent alone. So, as long as that mind, body, and soul is in the right place and in the right state, everything else will fall into place. Like I always say, it's a hard journey, but a necessary journey of maturation. So as always, I greatly appreciate y'all joining me, but be sure to hit that subscribe button, that like button, and the bell icon so you can stay up on the latest. Email me at dopediscourse@gmail.com for your free consultation, and I'll reply in private or on the channel if I feel the Dope family can learn from it. If you like to donate to help the channel grow, you can send your donations through PayPal or Cash App, both of which are in the description box, and all donations are greatly appreciated. But with much love as always, until next time, my Dope family, I'm out.